block. Bruce, you were sort of there at the beginning of the supply side revolution, the tax revolt, and I guess what is your sense of how it's evolved and what how the politics have changed over that period of time?
Well, first of all, when in the late 1970s, early 1980s, the big taxes were, in fact, at a historical high, but more importantly, they were rising very rapidly because we had high inflation. The tax system was not indexed for inflation.
Right.
People were getting pushed into higher tax brackets. We needed a big tax cut just to keep the tax burden from rising. And if you check the record, you'll see the taxes as a share of GDP in the decade of the 1980s were about the same as they were in the 1970s. So there was less of a tax cut than people imagine. And part of the reason for that is that Ronald Reagan raised taxes 11 different times after 1981. And this whole history of Ronald Reagan, the tax increaser, has been sort of whitewashed out of right-wing history. But by 1988, he took back about half of the 1981 tax cut with subsequent tax increases. And now I think today, our economic problems, our fiscal problems are vastly different than they were in 1981. We need different solutions. The idea that we can just have some cookie-cutter policy where, yeah, it's just cut taxes, 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 you know, all the time. That's the only policy is just ludicrous.
Please.
I mean, I was going to say that at the federal level, and one of the things that we saw in 2000, and I know you want to keep taxes and spending separate, but actually I think we really shouldn't. What we've seen with the Republican is this great pitch to reduce taxes, which, again, I'm all in favor of. I actually think that's like the route to great economic growth. That being said, that is not true even with the best tax cuts when you spend like a drunken sailor, which happened under the Republicans. And because like if you cut taxes and increase spending, that's the equivalent of raising taxes in the future. So I think it is really key to keep those together.
Bruce, how do you think there's a case to be made to fellow conservatives about raising taxes here?
Well, yes. First of all, one of the problems with the Norquist pledge is that if you never raise taxes, there's never any cost to raising spending. So Veronique is essentially incorrect. She's assuming the taxes will rise to pay for spending, but Norquist will not allow that to happen. It used to be that the main constraint on increasing spending was the fear that it would lead to higher taxes. But if taxes never rise, then you could have your cake and eat it too. We've reduced the tax cost of spending. Secondly, if you look at the CBO's long-term budget forecast, one of the main drivers, in fact, the main driver of long-term spending is interest on the debt. So if we don't raise taxes, we are automatically causing an increase in spending. So we need higher revenues, both to restrain spending and to change the dynamics of the fiscal process.
I don't agree with you, Bruce, because actually I think I'm proving
Big surprise, huh?
Because actually we're having this conversation about increasing taxes because while you're right that taxes don't go up immediately, what happens is that you end up with large deficits. You end up with a lot of debt. And then as a result, because people don't like debt and deficit, then that opens the door to, rather than cut spending, increase taxes. So I actually think there is a real connection.
But if you raise the taxes first, then you wouldn't have the deficits.
Well, I mean,
your idea is so goddamn dogmatic. It's just you're living in a fantasy world where we're going to balance the budget by abolishing Medicare and other ludicrous ideas.
There won't be enough tax revenue to pay for the large spending increases.
That's not true. That's not true. That's a factually incorrect statement. And let me point out something very important. Federal revenues today, right now, are about 15.8% of the GDP. That is way, way below the historical average. In the post-war, it's been 18.5% of GDP. But if we could just get up to the post-war average, we could knock $500 billion a year off the deficit.